Hello, everybody. Welcome or welcome back to Tiny Tiger Collective. I'm Helena, and today I'm excited to bring you a video that a couple of you very kindly expressed interest in seeing. And so I decided to move it up in my planned schedule of videos and share with you this really neat but powerful tool for clarifying your life strategy, purpose, and goals, known as the Strategic Life Portfolio. This tool is part of my little side quest in the last 3 months of 2025 to work out ways that I can make the most use of these interesting little templates at the back of Hobonichi planners. If you've been on my channel before, you would know that I have been a user of Hobonichi planners for the last 2 years, and I have purchased a brand new Hobonichi A6 Techo, as well as a Hobonichi cousin for 2026. And given the rising cost of these planners, I thought this is as good a time as any to give some more serious thought on how I can make use of all the little spreads that Hobonichi provides at the back of their planners that I confess previously I've ignored. But this time I thought it would be really fun to come up with novel and valuable ways to make the most of them. 2 weeks ago, I floated out the idea to share with you how this tool that I use in my personal life and planning, as well as a tool that I teach to both my undergraduate and my postgraduate students in my leading innovation and change subject, could be mapped out using this graph paper template on the back of all the Hobonichi planners. The one that I'm working in today is my 2024 Spring Start Hobonichi cousin. So I finished this book at the end of March this year, but I haven't touched any of these spreads in the back. So I thought it was a good idea to walk you through this tool and demonstrate every step as I go with this graph paper page. This graph paper page is also available in the A6 Techos. In fact, in the back of the A6 Techos, you actually get 2 pages of the graph paper, though obviously shrunken down to a much smaller size. So if I was doing this activity in my A6 planner, I would even consider doing one at the start of the year and then doing a mid-year check-in to see if the goals, the habits that I've set in service of the strategic life portfolio are having the intended effects. And if not, then how may I course correct my behaviors and actions in order to build the life that I want? The graph paper is unfortunately not available in the back of the Hobonichi Weeks, but the Hobonichi Weeks provides pages and pages of blank note paper, so it is absolutely doable to take one of these pages, and in fact, you could measure out the midpoint of this spread, draw a line across, and then you've got your 4 quadrants in order to do this activity, and indeed on a much larger space in the Hobonichi Weeks, should you wish. If you're new to my channel, I am a business school professor, and I teach a subject every year called Leading Innovation and Change. Much of this subject, as you could imagine, is about how managers and executives would lead their organization through change initiatives and projects. But an important component of this subject is getting my students to undertake a personal change project in which they evaluate their lives and decide on a behavior that they would like to change or a habit that they would like to introduce. This then allows my students the experience of systematically designing and implementing a change plan while deeply reflecting upon the psychodynamic dimensions of what it feels like to undergo personal change, in hopes of that giving them an empathetic connection to their future employees who they will be leading through their change initiatives. Given that they are business students, I come into this subject with a few constraints. So it wouldn't be suitable for me to barge right in with a very psychologically grounded change tool and say, all right, apply this. In the past, my students have resisted when they felt that the theories or frameworks that I'm teaching them don't solidly relate to business practice. Even if the reasons for teaching them evidence based psychological frameworks are clear to me, I will nevertheless have students query, how is this applicable to my future career and work? Given that strand of resistance, I found this particular framework, the Strategic Life Portfolio, because it was designed and devised by management consultants. It draws on a metaphor for business strategy and applies it to life strategy. So, the first point of contention here is that it is absolutely acceptable and legitimate to be critical of an attempt to apply corporate principles to your personal life. In fact, one could argue that business ideology already has colonized so much of our everyday lives, and there is a lot of value and wisdom to resisting these corporate ideas and ideals when it comes to things like personal growth and our creative hobbies. That said, what I really love about the Strategic Life Portfolio is that despite its strong grounding in business frameworks, I don't believe that it adopts business ideologies in the same way as a lot of personal change and goal setting tools that you can find on YouTube. Many of these tools, whether they were developed by business consultants or not, can, in my opinion, push values and objectives that I think are quite destructive. Some of the most popular productivity videos on YouTube often promote hyper productivity and self optimization, treating the self as a business in which we constantly push towards a fantasy of never ending growth. So that year by year, you're expected to become faster, stronger, more attractive, and wealthier, as though everybody is able bodied, as though nobody gets sick, nobody has a fleshy human body who fails us from time to time, and as if nobody has any responsibility or accountability to other people in their family, communities, and society, as though nobody has care to provide to children, to elderly parents, as though everybody can and should dedicate every waking moment to improving themselves. And what I really love about the Strategic Life Portfolio, it doesn't uncritically and unquestioningly draw on some of the most damaging aspects of business ideology, and instead, I think promotes a rather inclusive and flexible framework that invites people to think deeply about what a meaningful life, what living a good life means to them. So, the basis of the Strategic Life Portfolio is detailed in this article in Harvard Business Review. I will link to this article in the video description. And There are 4 elements of this resource to follow. When I teach it in my classroom, what I do is to keep things engaging for my students. I play for them the video that is attached to this article first, in which one of the developers of this framework explains this entire tool in, I think, a really clear and engaging way and steps you through exactly what it involves and what it looks like to take yourself through this tool. Now, 2 paragraphs above this video is where you will find the life strategy worksheet. After I play my students the video, I distribute hard copies of this worksheet. I get my students to go through step by step, and the form is actually very good at taking you through these reflective questions. You can also download this PDF and type directly into the form fields if you would prefer. What I think is really useful when it comes to the Hobonichi worksheet is actually, I think, an important foundational step, and that is mapping out your strategic life portfolio. In their framework, they break down the key areas of life and then further specify what they call the strategic life units. And there are 16 in total. So, under the area of relationships, you would have significant other, family, friendship. Under body, mind, and spirituality, you would have physical health or sports, mental health and mindfulness, spirituality and faith. Under the area community and society, you would have community citizenship and societal engagement. Under job, learning, and finances, the strategic life units are job and career, education and learning, and finances. Then interests and entertainment can be divided into hobbies and interests, online entertainment, and offline entertainment. And finally, the last strategic life area is personal care, which is separated into your physiological needs and also the activities of daily living. The fourth element and the last element of this resource is the article text itself. And I think it's really well worth reading the article in depth because it explains where they got these strategic life areas and strategic life units from. And it's very scientifically grounded in how it was derived from a large scale survey of people's life satisfaction. There are an infinite number of goal setting tools where the creator has designed their own life areas. And you may very well have, over the last few years of journaling or planning, worked out your own strategic life areas, although that might be not what you called it. What I love about this tool is that it is so scientifically robust, and there's a clear reason why each of these units were chosen and defined as they are. Sometimes, particularly content on YouTube, don't have the foundation of a evidence-based framework and tends to be whatever the creator has devised. Most of the time, it is absolutely helpful to use your own intuition and your understanding of your unique life circumstances and needs in order to make tweaks to what your life areas and life units might be. But occasionally, some of these frameworks, particularly when circulated through social media or packaged and sold as part of a personal change or self-help program, they can occasionally veer into pseudoscience. So manifesting, for example, and other forms of magical thinking is one that sometimes comes up a lot in this type of content. And so that's why I really love this tool, particularly when teaching in a university context, to show my students, who are no stranger to the sort of programs that are taught on social media to show them what an evidence based framework could look like. And that means from that basis, they can absolutely make tweaks and adjustments. And I'll talk through what one of mine can be. So, once you've got a list of your 16 strategic life units, which I've written down here, what I like to do is now looking at that, see if in this season of my life there are any further nuances that would be helpful for me to make. So, one of the ones that jump out at me is that while this resource lists family as one strategic life unit, I have a 3-year-old toddler and I have aging parents who live in a different state to me. And those two things are quite distinct, even though they might both be categorized under family. Right now, my son is who I spend most of my time with because he's really at an age where he's not very independent and needs a lot of time and attention. And a lot of time and attention that I think is absolutely right and I'm happy to give. My parents, though, are quite a distinctive category in and of themselves. I would love to spend more time with my parents. And that means for me, I don't give as much to my parents as I would like to. With that as its own strategic life unit, enables me to be more precise about how I could plan visits or maintain greater communication with FaceTime calls and messages in order to strengthen my bond with my parents, even in this very busy season of my life. So once you have your 16 or fewer or greater strategic life units, the next step is to map them out. And this is where the graph paper comes in. So, what I did was I split the chart into 4 punnets. On the y axis, that represents importance. So, how much of a priority is that strategic life unit to your life? Then, on the x axis, you've got satisfaction. So, how satisfied are you? Now, you can absolutely, for simplicity's sake, just plot out where each of these areas fall. But what the resource recommends is drawing a dot and using the size of the dot to represent how much time you currently spend on that activity. So let's say I took the very first strategic life unit under the area of relationships and my significant other. So I would say my partner is very important to me, and I feel fairly satisfied with that aspect of my life. And so where I might plot him would maybe be over here. I've got a fairly large dot, and what that represents is that while I do spend a lot of time with my partner in the same room, we're not necessarily bonding when we're both wrangling my 3-year-old into his outfit of the day, for example, or he's busy in the kitchen cooking and I'm feeding our son. So, compared to before we had our child, we don't spend as much time one on one with each other as we used to. But we are very lucky in that both of us have flexible work and we often take our lunch breaks together. So we still get that quality time. So then that's where I would put significant other. There is no need to be too scientific about this. But if you wanted to get scientific about it, this resource does actually encourage you to get as systematic and precise as you'd like. So it breaks down that in a given week, we have 168 hours. So you can actually calculate with a certain degree of accuracy how many hours per week you actually devote to each of these strategic life units. In this past month, I discovered a software engineer who has created the Strategic Life Portfolio as a web app. So if you want to get really, really precise, you can actually use this tool and enter your importance, your satisfaction, and the number of hours that you estimate you give to that activity every week. And it will actually chart out the graph for you. And I will link to this resource in the description as well. And then I'll proceed to map out all of my other strategic life units. All right, so I've now colored in my 17 strategic life units and where they fall on this chart of importance and satisfaction in my life. And I very much just intuited how much time I spend on them. Although I did go through Cameron Lai's web app in the last 2 weeks as I was showing my students how it's used in class. And so this has been grounded in a more thoughtful assessment of how long I spend in each unit, but I haven't drawn everything to scale or anything like that. I think it's okay to go with the flow a little bit. So, through that process, what I can immediately see is that I am overall living a really contented and fulfilled life. The vast majority of my strategic life units you can see in this top right punnet, meaning that they are important to me and I am broadly satisfied with all of them. I'm obviously the part of my life that I'm most satisfied with is my education and learning. I am a passionate lifelong learner, even though it's been 13 years since I graduated from university. But this semester, despite the busyness of having twice as many students as I normally do, I am undertaking an adult learning course at my university all about how to make my classrooms and my pedagogy more inclusive for neurodivergent students. And I am loving it so much because so many of my colleagues in that course identify as being autistic or having ADHD, and they're able to share their own experiences as students as well as teachers, meeting other students and what they do from a place of deep empathic understanding to make their teaching strategies more inclusive and resonant. I spend a lot of time on my hobbies, and I'm working on my hobby right now, making this YouTube video. So that's also very satisfying. I'm satisfied with my career, with my finances. In fact, I'm on track in 2026 by the very end of the year to pay off my mortgage on this house that I'm currently living in. So I imagine after that, that little dot will shift even more further to the right hand side. I spend a lot of time on my physiological needs, so that's eating and sleeping. Although, if you've been on my channel before, then you know that I struggle on and off with sleep maintenance insomnia. And I've just about gotten over a rough patch. That's why this area isn't completely over on the right hand side. But I can certainly maintain my CBTI, so cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia practices, more faithfully and therefore improve my satisfaction in that area. As I said, I broke up family into my son and my parents. So I spend a lot of time with my son. In fact, I think that should be larger than sleeping and eating. But I say I have room to become more satisfied in that I see opportunities for me to have more fun and adventure with him. And something that I've started practicing that I can embrace even more is actually putting my phone away when I'm playing with him and giving him more of my undivided attention when we're connecting with one another. If I made more of an effort to do that more often with him, I also imagine that that would improve my satisfaction. My parents, however, are very important to me, given that they're fairly high up, but I am not as satisfied as I could be. I'm an only child, and I am so grateful that I have a true friendship with my parents. And since becoming a mother, I've only appreciated them more and more when I look back on all the years that my parents trusted me to make the decisions in my own life, even if they believed that I wasn't making the optimal decision or that I would inevitably face failure and disappointment. They always respected my independence. So, just because in this season of my life with a toddler and living in a different state, I'm not spending as much time with my parents as I used to when I lived at home, it doesn't mean that that relationship is eroding or falling apart. I think my friendship with my parents will be one for the rest of our lives. But I can see myself making more of a concerted effort to FaceTime them regularly, especially giving them the opportunity to see their grandson, and also planning out at least one visit a year to see them in Melbourne. In fact, I am planning a trip to Melbourne in December to spend some quality time with them. Also, with a young child, I don't have as much time for my friendships as I would like to. And I did indeed move to this city 3.5 years ago, right before my son was born. And so many of my friends are back home in Sydney as well. So that's also an area of my life that I could work on more and reach out to my friends, plan more visits back to Sydney, and invite them back up to spend some time with me. So many of my friends are friends that I met through school. And because of that, all of us are turning 40 in the coming year. So luckily, we do have a couple of trips planned in order to celebrate these big milestone birthdays together. But next year, when we turn 41, 42, I don't want that connection to dissipate again. So, this quadrant is the one that needs the greatest attention because this area represents what is important to you, but what you're lacking in satisfaction. So, for me, it's my parents, it's my friendships. Straddling the border is I have here offline entertainment. So, offline entertainment is more important to me than online entertainment, but I've noticed that I spend more time doom scrolling than I would like. And I could do more to introduce offline entertainment, like playing a solo RPG, reading books, and traveling. And I certainly don't need to be spending as much time on YouTube as I have this past year. And then finally, in this quadrant, I have societal engagement as something that I am hardly spending any time at all in this season of my life on. But it definitely used to be something that was very important to me. So that would be volunteering or activism, according to the Strategic Life resource. So, for me, one way of boosting my sense of societal engagement could simply be to rejoin a political party and research a list of charities whose missions and values align with my own, that I can make a commitment to donating a certain percentage of my salary to that charity. Down here in this quadrant are the areas of my life that I'm not very satisfied with, but they're also not that important. So here I actually have community and citizenship. So that's different from societal engagement in that it's a bit more local. So it might be joining local clubs. And as I said, I'm fairly new to my city. But what I've really appreciated about my local area is that they really do invest in community spirit and organization. So our local councillor hosts regular festivals, food markets, family friendly events across all the local parks. And now that the weather is warming up, there are more and more opportunities to participate in those events. So, making more of an effort to look out for my counselors' regular newsletters and actually scheduling those events in my family's shared calendar and attending those events and maybe knocking on the doors of my neighbors and asking them, hey, did you hear about this event? Will you be there? I hope to see you there. That's definitely going to push my satisfaction closer to this quadrant. But because I've rated this as lower importance, at least in this season of my life, compared to societal engagement, friendships, parents, and to an extent, offline entertainment, that would be the area that this exercise invites me to pay my attention to first. Finally, I have here straddling the border spirituality, which again, in this season of my life is very low importance, but in previous seasons of my life has been higher. So that's something that if I start moving some of these other high priority strategic life units towards that end of the satisfaction scale, I can absolutely look at a few things that I could do to feel more connected to my spirituality. But according to this chart, it would be wrong to dive and hyper focus on that above the other areas that I've identified through this exercise as requiring more attention. So, given that it is only early October, I thought then I would use my old Hobonichi 2024 cousin to map this out in order to develop a couple of behavioral changes and habits to help me shift some of these across. So, if I go back to the worksheet that came with this life strategy resource, it walks you through a little bit of a preamble where you're invited to reflect on your personal definitions of a great life. So, what are your priorities? For example, do you value relationships? Are you achievement oriented? I'm personally recovering from being a high achievement oriented person, and I'm trying to invite a softer life. So for me, relationships, learning, and growth, those would probably be a little bit more important for me, or I'd like to practice making them of greater importance and value. You can reflect upon your strengths, values, think about what lights you up, and also your worldly needs in order to devise what you think your life purpose might be. From the purpose, which can be, very lofty and aspirational, you break it down into something a little bit more practical and you devise your life vision. So the example they give on this worksheet is if your purpose is to bridge cultural divides, your life vision might be to travel the world as a multilingual translator. And that strategic life portfolio activity feeds into this worksheet about midway through when you're asked to list your high priority strategic life units. So, what are the areas of your life that are important to you, but you're currently not so satisfied in? So, for me, I would then list parents' friendships, societal engagement, and offline entertainment. And I would probably just have the four there rather than needing to fill up all six. It then walks you through essentially what some of you might know to be SMART goals. So, goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, with extra two little sections here that invites you to think about rewards and consequences for when you don't meet your goals. So that's using behavioral psychology. Essentially, how do you use positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and punishment to motivate behavioral changes? And then here it gets you to commit to some form of weekly check in. So at the end of the week or at the start of the week, whatever time you have available in your schedule, to come back and review your progress towards your goals. And that would be what some people argue is a smarter framework. So they add E and the R. The R stands for review. So that means committing to a regular time frame where you review your progress towards your goals. The E seems to change framework by framework. So I've seen people say easy. So meaning instead of saying, oh, I'm going to travel the world as a multilingual translator and starting with that, my goal is to obtain the French A2 qualification. You make it easy by saying, can I do 10 minutes of Duolingo today? So that can be often a more accessible way into a lifelong habit, or at least a long term habit. So if you follow each of these rows, it's going to basically step you through how to create SMART goals in order to attend to the strategic life units that you identified as needing greater attention, energy, commitment in order to push towards higher levels of satisfaction. So for me, one of the things that I've been practicing over the past week is cutting out doom scrolling from my evenings completely and instead substituting the 2 or 3 hours that I previously spent browsing video after video on YouTube with doing a bit of journaling, collaging, reading a book, or even listening to a podcast. So far, it has done wonders for my mental health. And unexpectedly, it has had an enormous positive impact on my sleep as well, because I'm not accidentally dipping into vitriolic comment sections where people shout at each other and say the nastiest things that I imagine many of them wouldn't have the heart to say to somebody's face, but somehow feel emboldened to say it on a social media platform. And that got under my skin more than I would like to admit. So cutting out doom scrolling and cutting out reading comment sections, wow, has it really been a game changer for me? I have so far planned 2 trips for the remainder of the year, one to see my parents and one to see my friends. So that will hopefully, by the end of the year, push those areas closer to this quadrant. And societal engagement will be something that I need to do a little bit of research around in order to find the ways that I could contribute within the time and energy constraints that I have in this season of my life. So that's how the strategic life portfolio exercise can help you identify the areas of your life that valuably require more intentionality and goal setting around. And it's also something that can fit into the graph paper template at the back of the Hobonichi planners. So, with my 2024 planner serving as my, I guess, quarter 4 2025 strategic life portfolio, that means come January 2026, my brand new Hobonichi cousin offers yet another blank slate to create a new graph. And hopefully, I'll see that by the end of the year, some of these areas have already started moving in the right direction, which means repeating this exercise allows me to update for any unforeseen changes in my circumstance that might lead to decreased satisfaction or increased priority, while helping me reflect on new areas that I can work towards and invest some time and energy into while riding off the momentum of having worked on these 4 different strategic life units. I'd love to know in the comments below, how do you use the graph paper? Or have you, like me, left it blank for the last 2 years or however many years you've been using Hobonichi planners? And is the strategic life portfolio a tool, a resource, or even a springboard of inspiration for a different tool or approach that you think you could use to help you not just set goals for goals' sake, but to set goals that are deeply tied to a scientifically robust framework for what a great life means to you? I can't wait to devote the next 3 months of 2025 to working on these 4 strategic life units that I believe will give me the greatest value of improving my life satisfaction. I will absolutely update you as I look towards preparing my next portfolio map in my new cousin for 2026, while going more in depth into what will be the specific goals that I'm going to set for myself in the new year. In the coming weeks, I would also love to bring you my methods for filling out some of these other really sweet and interesting templates at the back of my Hobonichis, such as the My 100, which Michael from Michael in the Margins inspired me to use as a bucket list. So I may give you a little peep into the process of brainstorming ideas for 100 things that I would like to do, grounded in an approach of not what I want to achieve in my life, because as I said, I'm a recovering overachiever, but how I want to feel in my life in 2026. Thank you so much for joining me in this video this week. I hope the strategic life portfolio was interesting for you. And I hope that there's something in there that might add value to your personal change and goal setting practices. It is also absolutely okay to not set goals. I am a big fan of reminding ourselves that we are human beings, not human doings. And when you are satisfied with your life, when you already draw joy and fulfillment, as I do, there's no need to be constantly striving to be faster, stronger, more attractive, and wealthier every single year of our lives. Indeed, I think there is such wisdom in being content, in learning to be content, and learning to do nothing. I wish you a wonderful week ahead, whether you are chasing your goals or embracing your rest. I look forward to seeing you next week. Take good care until then. Bye-bye.